Emma walked into the crowded gala with calm eyes and a quiet confidence that made most people overlook her. The chandeliers above shimmered and reflected 1,000 tiny lights across the marble floor, yet she did not glance at them. She moved as if the noise of the room could not touch her, every step measured and silent yet commanding, in a way that made even the security guards glance twice at her. As she passed by, the buzz of conversations died down briefly when she entered the main hall, and she noticed the whispers that traveled like a current across the tables, each voice trying to guess who this woman was. But Emma was nobody, and everybody all at once. She carried no jewels, except for the steel watch on her wrist, and no designer gown could hide the muscles that flexed beneath her dress fabric. She smiled faintly at a group of women who tried to stare her down, and she felt the heat of their envy as they whispered about her posture and her elegance. Yet it was all a distraction. Nothing here mattered except the one man who had already decided he could define her with a word. Ethan Blackwood noticed her immediately and smirked, thinking this delicate woman could never match the strength of the men he knew. His eyes narrowed, and he moved toward her with that slow, arrogant gait of someone used to being the center of attention. He called her weak in front of everyone, and the room fell silent. The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown across a battlefield. Emma did not flinch. Instead, she smiled slightly and said nothing. She tilted her head in a way that suggested amusement and a hidden depth that no one could read. She walked past him without breaking her stride, her heels clicking against the floor, like a metronome counting down to something that no one in that room could predict. Ethan laughed lightly, at first thinking this would be enough to shake her. But as he watched her move through the crowd, he felt a strange unease creeping into his chest, as if the joke was not on her but on him. Emma slipped behind the curtains, leading to the private wing of the gala. She paused there for a moment and took a deep breath. The scent of expensive perfume and polished wood could not mask the tension. In the air, she let her eyes close for a brief second and imagined the training hall she had left behind. The weights stacked like silent sentinels, the padded floors that had witnessed sweat and pain and triumph alike. Her mind raced through the drills she had run that morning and the techniques she had perfected over years of discipline. The memory of Navy SEALs following her commands flawlessly brought a smile to her face that no one here could see. She opened her eyes and stepped out into the hallway where the shadows stretched long, and her thoughts turned to the challenge she would craft for Ethan. The plan forming in her mind was dangerous and precise, and it thrilled her in a way that no ballroom or gala ever could. She remembered the first time she had been underestimated, the first time someone had laughed at her because she was small and slight, and the world expected her to crumble under pressure. She had been young and untested then, but the lessons had burned into her. Muscles and bones, each insult a spark that had forged her into someone who could command respect from the strongest men alive. She touched the steel watch on her wrist and felt the cold weight as a reminder of time and of discipline, and she knew that the moment she would show Ethan what she was capable of was coming soon. The excitement in her chest was almost unbearable, and yet she maintained her calm exterior as she re-entered the main hall, pretending to be just another guest, sipping wine and smiling politely while her mind raced with calculations and contingencies for the challenge she would present. Ethan had returned to the center of the room, now surrounded by his friends and colleagues. He was still laughing when he saw her emerge again, and the smirk returned to his face. He thought he understood the game. He thought he could predict her next move. He could not. And every instinct in Emma screamed at her that the plan had to be executed perfectly for this first impression to shatter his arrogance in the most spectacular way possible. She moved closer, and the hum of conversation seemed to fade around them. She spoke softly, almost inaudibly, yet every word carried weight and subtle command that made the Men near her shift uncomfortably in their seats. She mentioned a training demonstration that would be held in private for select members of the elite fitness and security community, a place where only those capable could follow her instructions. Ethan laughed again, thinking it was a joke or some kind of elaborate ruse. Yet he was intrigued despite himself. Curiosity gnawed at him like a persistent shadow. He could not dismiss the subtle challenge in her tone or the unshakable confidence in her posture. The memory of her walk past him lingered like a ghost, and he felt a twinge of something unfamiliar, perhaps respect or fear he could not yet name. She left him with an invitation that was more of a dare, and he accepted it, despite not knowing. What he was stepping into the room buzzed again with conversation and laughter, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere, watching her glide across the floor the way she commanded the space without touching anyone or making a sound. It was mesmerizing and unsettling, and he did not realize the first seeds of doubt had begun to take root in him, because the truth was, he had never met anyone like her. Emma stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The night air was crisp and smelled faintly of rain and concrete. She leaned against the railing and let her mind wander to the training hall she had run drills in at dawn, the smell of rubber mats and metal weights, the echo of commands shouted and obeyed, and the sight of trainees pushing past their limits. She remembered the SEALs who had stared at her with incredulity. The first time she had trained them, they had not believed her at first, and yet she had guided them with patience and precision, and by the end of the session, they had looked at her with something approaching awe. She smiled slightly, thinking of Ethan watching her now as if she were a puzzle he could not solve, yet she knew the real puzzle would come when she revealed the true extent of her skills, and she had no intention of holding back. Her phone buzzed in her pocket and she pulled it out to see a message confirming the final details of the demonstration. She felt a thrill run through her chest. Her fingers tightened around the device and she imagined. Ethan's expression when he realized what he had stumbled into her mind raced with strategies and contingencies. Every possible outcome played through her thoughts. As if she were running a mental obstacle course, she knew the moment of confrontation would arrive sooner than he expected, and the room below still unaware of the storm about to be unleashed. She put the phone away and straightened her posture. The lights of the city reflected in her eyes, as if daring her to make the first move. And she smiled. Emma returned to the main hall slowly, weaving through the crowd. She kept her gaze forward as if looking past everyone toward something invisible. Only she could see the tension in the air grew thicker. Every step she took, and the whispers followed her like ripples in a pond. She could feel the weight of expectation and curiosity pressing on her shoulders. Yet she welcomed it, for it meant that the moment she revealed her secret would have maximum impact. Ethan's eyes met hers across the room, and for a moment his smirk faltered. He could not read her expression or anticipate what she was planning. He saw only calm and certainty, and that was more terrifying than any threat he had ever faced. Yet he did not know what she had hidden in the shadows of her mind as the evening progressed. Emma excused herself from the chatter and laughter and slipped toward the exit. She moved with purpose and silent strength. The gala continued behind her, oblivious to the storm. That was coming. She knew that in less than 24 hours everything would change, that the first impression of weakness would be shattered, and that the billionaire's son, who thought he understood power, would see true strength for the first time yet. Even as she stepped into the night air, the cold wind brushing her face, she sensed another presence following her every shadow, hiding a secret she had not yet uncovered. And she realized that the challenge ahead would test not only Ethan, but herself in ways she had not imagined. Emma arrived at her training facility long before dawn. The sky was still a deep shade of indigo, and the air smelled of wet concrete and dew. She moved through the empty streets with purpose, each step deliberate, as if the city itself would bend to her will when she opened the heavy steel doors of the facility. A rush of familiar scents greeted her. Rubber mats, metal weights, and the faint tang of sweat from early morning drills. She inhaled deeply and felt The calm determination settled into her chest. This place was hers and only hers, yet it was also a battlefield, a place where strength, discipline, and fear collided, and she thrived within its boundaries. The room was empty now, but soon it would be, filled with the elite few who could follow her commands. The Navy SEALs she had trained for years, and even in the quiet, she could hear the echo of their past drills in her mind, the memory of their exhausted faces, the sweat running down their bodies, the way they had pushed past limits that even they thought impossible. Emma smiled faintly, thinking of the arrogance she had to conceal in front of Ethan, the billionaire's son. He had no idea what awaited him, and she relished the thought that soon he would see everything he had underestimated, and more. She moved to the center of the room and began her own warm-up, a precise sequence of stretches, jumps, and calisthenics that would prepare her body for what was coming. She felt every muscle respond. As if greeting an old friend, Ethan arrived unannounced. He had followed the address she had left behind with a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. His expensive shoes squeaked against the polished concrete as he entered the dimly lit hall, and for the first time in his life he felt a twinge of unease. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the lights and the distant city outside the windows. He saw her standing there, muscles tense, eyes sharp and alert. She turned slowly, as if sensing his presence, and Ethan froze. He expected a woman, but she moved like a predator, a commander, a force of nature, and the smug arrogance he usually wore like armor faltered. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. She did not rush him instead. She let him take in the room, the equipment, the precision, and the air of control that clung to every corner. Emma finally spoke softly, and her words carried a weight that Ethan could not ignore. She explained that what he had mocked as weakness was years of training strategy and discipline, a level of skill few could even imagine. She motioned to the equipment and the mats and the targets and invited him to try a single drill, a simple test. She called it a warm-up, but it was anything but simple. Ethan laughed nervously, thinking he could handle anything. Yet the first movement required balance, speed, and mental focus, and he stumbled immediately. The room echoed with the sound of his clumsy landing, and she did not offer help instead. She watched silently, her eyes sharp and unyielding. He struggled again and again, his confidence eroding, while she moved with effortless control, showing him the rhythm of the drill, the precision of every step, and the sharpness of every command. The room seemed to shrink around him as he realized that she was no ordinary trainer, and he was far from prepared. Emma then brought in her team, the SEALs she had trained, and they entered quietly, their presence filling the space with tension and authority. Ethan's jaw tightened as he watched men twice his size follow her every word without question. They executed complex maneuvers flawlessly under her guidance. His laughter died entirely, replaced by awe and a flicker of fear. He had never seen obedience like this, precision like this, control. He noticed the subtle corrections she gave the trainees, the way a simple gesture could change the flow of a movement or the outcome of a drill. He tried to mask his shock, but it was impossible. He was witnessing something extraordinary, something that shattered every assumption he had made about strength and power. And he realized the first challenge was only the beginning. Emma walked among the trainees, correcting postures, guiding movements, and observing Ethan's reactions. She noticed the way his eyes widened at the fluidity of her commands, and she allowed herself a faint smile, knowing he was beginning to understand that weakness was never about size or appearance. It was about discipline, focus, and courage, and she watched as he attempted to mimic a drill and failed repeatedly, his frustration evident, yet she offered nothing but silent instruction to the team, allowing him to witness the consequences of underestimation. Every stumble and misstep was a lesson he could not ignore. And as she turned back to the SEALs, she whispered a command that set the next exercise in motion, a simulation of a high-stakes mission, and Ethan realized suddenly that he was no longer a spectator but a participant in something far beyond his comprehension. The simulation began in earnest. Obstacles sprang to life. Targets appeared from hidden panels, and the trainees moved with precision through complex patterns that required coordination, strength, and quick thinking. Ethan attempted to follow, but every moment he fell further behind. His muscles ached. His mind raced, and he felt the sting of humiliation for the first time in his life. And yet he could not look away. The thrill of the action, the intensity of her commands, and the discipline of her team drew him deeper into the scenario. He felt adrenaline spike in his veins and a strange respect forming alongside the fear. He was learning in real time the cost of underestimating her. The room seemed to contract with every movement, the air thick with tension and anticipation, and he could sense that Emma had prepared a revelation that would leave him speechless. Emma paused the simulation for a brief moment and allowed the trainees to catch their breath. The silence was almost deafening as Ethan struggled to recover. He watched her move with the same calm efficiency as before and realized that even in pause, she commanded attention and authority. Her eyes scanned the room, assessing every detail, noting every weakness and strength. Her mind raced ahead, planning the next phase of the challenge, and Ethan felt his pulse quicken with anticipation. He knew the next sequence would test him in ways he could not imagine, and as she looked directly at him, a faint smile on her lips, he understood that he was standing on the edge of a revelation he was not yet ready to face. And the moment to confront the truth was drawing impossibly close. Emma then issued the final drill, a test of mental endurance and physical skill, combined a sequence that required not only strength and agility, but strategy and awareness. Every move mattered. Every decision could determine success or failure. The SEALs executed flawlessly while Ethan struggled to keep pace. He felt exhaustion clawing at him, his mind spinning with confusion and awe at the same time, and just as he thought he could no longer continue, she signaled the team to stop, and he staggered to the center, gasping for breath. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the lights and his own heartbeat. Emma walked slowly toward him, and for the first time he saw her full presence, a force of nature. Unmatched in power and intelligence, she stopped inches from him and whispered simply, "Now, you know what strength truly is." And Ethan realized with a jolt that the test was only the beginning of what she had in store for him, and the next revelation would change everything. He thought he knew about power and control. The SEALs filed out silently, leaving Ethan and Emma alone in the quiet room. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. He tried to speak, but words failed him. He saw her calm eyes and the faint smile that suggested she had more surprises waiting for him. The knowledge that he had underestimated her burned sharply, and he felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and a growing obsession to understand how she had achieved such mastery. Emma turned toward the exit and paused, looking back at him. The shadows of the room stretching long across the floor, hinting at challenges he could not yet imagine. And he realized that the next confrontation would demand everything, had and more, and that the night was far from over. Emma arrived at the training hall long before dawn, the sky still a deep indigo, and the city silent except for the distant hum of traffic. She moved with deliberate precision, each step measured as if she owned every inch of the space. The heavy steel doors closed behind her with a resonant clang, and the familiar scent of rubber mats and polished metal greeted her like an old friend. She paused for a moment, closing her eyes and inhaling deeply, feeling the anticipation rise in her chest. This was the arena where she transformed ordinary men into warriors. And today, it would be the arena where Ethan Blackwood would finally understand the cost of underestimating her. She began with the warm-up, a fluid sequence of stretches, calisthenics, and precision drills designed to engage every muscle and awaken every neuron. Ethan followed hesitantly, his expensive shoes squeaking against the mats. He tried to mimic her movements, but his balance faltered, and his timing was off. She watched silently, noting each stumble, the way his shoulders tensed, the beads of sweat forming at his hairline. She let him struggle, knowing that every misstep was a lesson in humility and a revelation of his own limitations. The seals moved around him effortlessly, responding to every subtle command she issued, and the contrast between them was undeniable. He was an observer to power he had never truly encountered. Emma increased the intensity of the drills, pushing the trainees into sequences, requiring both physical strength and mental acuity. Ethan attempted to keep pace and failed repeatedly. His frustration mounting with every stumble and hesitation, she let him falter deliberately, teaching through observation. And consequence, the seals executed flawlessly, following commands that were almost imperceptible. Her eyes scanning every corner of the room, catching every detail, every movement. She was the eye of the storm, calm, precise, and unstoppable, while Ethan struggled to keep up the room, seemed to shrink with every motion as if containing the pressure of expectation and discipline itself. She then introduced the tactical course, a labyrinth of obstacles and simulations that required split-second decisions, coordination and strategy. Every move mattered, every second counted. The seals flowed through the course like water around rocks, executing flawless maneuvers, while Ethan stumbled at every turn. His muscles screamed, his mind raced, and yet he could not stop watching her. She moved among the trainees, effortlessly correcting positions, issuing subtle gestures that changed the outcome of entire sequences, and he realized with a jolt that he was witnessing mastery incarnate. The arrogance he had carried into this place began to crumble under the weight of her competence and the quiet terror of his own inadequacy. Emma raised the stakes further, adding mental puzzles layered over the physical trials, forcing the participants to make rapid decisions under pressure. Ethan faltered repeatedly, his ego bruised, his body exhausted. Yet she watched silently, allowing the lessons to sink deeper. With every mistake, the seals navigated each challenge seamlessly, while he struggled to comprehend the combination of intellect and precision required. She moved beside him occasionally, guiding a hand, offering a word of instruction, but never intervening fully, allowing the lesson of surrender and discipline to embed in his mind. The realization that strength was never about appearance or wealth struck him with a clarity that was almost painful. Then she initiated the final high-stakes simulation, a complex infiltration and escape scenario. The room transformed into a battlefield. Lights flickered, shadows shifted, and obstacles emerged from hidden panels. The trainees moved with flawless coordination, while Ethan's attempts were clumsy and hesitant, each misstep a reminder of how far he was from her level of control. He felt the sting of humiliation and the thrill of fear coursing through him as adrenaline forced his senses to heighten. Every command she issued reshaped the environment, every movement choreographed for precision and efficiency. He could not tear his eyes away from her effortless execution, and he realized the magnitude of the mistake he had made in mocking her strength. The climax approached. Emma signaled the team to converge on the final target, a locked chamber requiring both mental strategy and physical skill to access. She instructed Ethan to follow carefully, his heart pounding in his chest. He attempted to obey, but every step brought hesitation and fear. The seals moved as a single unit under her guidance while he struggled to synchronize with the rhythm of her commands. He realized that to succeed, he would have to relinquish control, surrender his ego, and trust in her design. The room crackled with tension, the air thick with anticipation, and every second seemed stretched into eternity as he faced the final challenge of this trial. Emma moved beside him, guiding his hands and whispering instructions, her voice calm and precise, each word carrying authority and intent. The seals executed flawlessly, and he felt the immense pressure to perform, his muscles screaming and mind racing, yet he had no choice but to follow her lead. He realized that every command she gave was designed not only to test skill, but to reveal character and courage. The vault opened, revealing the final objective, and he stared at it, unable to comprehend the orchestration of strategy, strength, and timing that had brought him here. She looked at him with unyielding calm and whispered that true strength is never measured by arrogance or wealth, but by discipline, focus, and courage. And he felt the weight of those words settle into his chest as the seals filed out, leaving Ethan alone with her. He felt a sudden unease, a shadow of something unanticipated warning him that this was only the beginning of her lesson. She paused at the doorway and looked back at him, her presence a quiet storm, promising challenges yet unseen. He realized for the first time the magnitude of underestimating her. The calm authority in her eyes suggested that the final revelation was still to come, and that he would need every ounce of courage, intelligence, and resolve to face what awaited him. The tension in the room was palpable, and he understood instinctively that the night and the lessons had not ended, but only grown more dangerous. Emma finally stepped into the shadows, leaving Ethan standing in the quiet hall, his chest heaving, the room empty, except for the echo of her commands and the memory of the seal's flawless execution. The lessons of the morning had already begun to reshape him, his arrogance chipped away by the undeniable reality of her strength and presence. He knew that the ultimate test had yet to arrive, and that the next phase of her plan would challenge not just his body, but his mind and his soul. He swallowed hard, realizing that the storm she had promised was imminent, and that surrendering to her guidance completely was the only way to survive the coming trials. The night was thick with tension, and the air in the training hall was electric. Emma stood at the center, her presence commanding the shadows that stretched along the walls. Ethan watched her every movement, his chest tight with anticipation and fear. He had never faced anyone like her, and the weight of that realization pressed down on him heavily. She gestured for him to follow her deeper into the hall, and he obeyed hesitantly, aware that every step would test him further than anything he had experienced before. She initiated the final challenge, a simulation unlike any previous trial, combining mental strategy, physical endurance, and emotional resilience. Obstacles shifted and transformed the space around them. Lights flickered, creating illusions, shadows twisted, and the environment seemed alive. Every movement mattered, every decision carried consequences. The seals moved with flawless coordination, their actions fluid under her silent commands, while Ethan struggled to keep pace, his muscles screaming, his mind spinning. He realized with growing terror that this trial was designed to strip away ego, fear, and hesitation simultaneously. Emma began with a series of rapid commands, weaving complexity into simplicity. The seals executed each maneuver with precision, while Ethan stumbled and faltered, his confidence eroded with every misstep. She moved beside him, silently correcting his posture, guiding his hands, her presence calm yet unyielding, and he felt the overwhelming pressure of her skill crushing his arrogance. She whispered instructions, and he tried desperately to follow every word, yet the pace was relentless, and he understood that the only way to survive was to surrender completely to her guidance and trust the force that had humbled him. The obstacles intensified. She introduced challenges that tested his intellect alongside his body, complex puzzles layered over physical trials, requiring split-second decisions, coordination and timing every step. A potential trap, every hesitation costly. The seals moved like shadows around him, executing flawlessly while he fought to keep up each mistake, a brutal reminder of the gap between them. He felt exhaustion clawing at him, every nerve on fire. Yet he could not look away. He could not escape the pull of her presence, the quiet authority that demanded obedience, respect, and attention all at once. Emma then pushed the scenario into chaos. Lights flickered violently, shadows merged, and hidden traps emerged from the walls and floor. Ethan found himself Scrambling through the maze of challenges, his body aching, his mind racing. She watched him silently, allowing the lessons of humility, fear, and resilience to sink deep into his consciousness. The seals flowed around him, executing complex maneuvers. With seamless coordination, every subtle gesture from her guiding them perfectly, while he struggled to comprehend the orchestration of power, discipline, and intelligence that surrounded him. As the trial reached its peak, she directed the seals to converge on the final chamber, a vault requiring not only strength and strategy but mental clarity and courage to access. She gestured for Ethan to attempt the final step. His hands trembling, his pulse hammering in his ears, he approached the target. Aware that failure meant humiliation and insight into his limitations, the seals executed the sequence flawlessly under her direction. While he faltered, he realized the enormity of underestimating her and the depth of skill that had brought him. To this moment, Emma moved beside him, offering a hand, a word, a subtle gesture. Every instruction precise, deliberate, and laden with authority. He followed each direction as best he could, surrendering to the rhythm of her commands, slowly synchronizing. With her movements and guidance, the vault opened, revealing the culmination of the trial. And he felt a mixture of awe, fear, and relief. The culmination of skill, strength, and intellect he had witnessed firsthand, the reality of her mastery, and understood. The profound lesson she had designed, the entire experience, had reshaped his understanding of power, discipline, and resilience. She stepped back, allowing him a moment to absorb the revelation. The seals filed silently out, leaving him alone with her. In the dim glow of the hall, his chest heaving, sweat soaking his clothes, and his mind racing with comprehension and respect. He realized that the trials had broken his arrogance and replaced it with humility, courage, and a newfound understanding. Of what strength truly meant, Emma's calm eyes held his gaze, a faint smile on her lips. The shadows stretched long across the floor, hinting at both the danger he had survived and the mastery he had witnessed. Finally, she spoke softly, words that cut through the tension like a blade. Strength is never about appearance or wealth or arrogance. It is about discipline, focus, and courage. And he absorbed the weight of those words, feeling the magnitude of the lesson she had imparted. The seals stood silently behind her, a living testament to her skill and authority. And he understood that he had not just witnessed training, he had participated in the forging of warriors, and himself had been tempered in the process. The night had challenged every assumption he had held about power and control, leaving him changed. As Emma turned to leave, Ethan felt a flicker of fear, excitement, and anticipation. He realized that though the trial was over, the lesson would stay with him forever. The hall now, empty, except for their footprints echoed with the memory of precision, endurance, and dominance. He swallowed hard, understanding that the storm she had unleashed had passed, but the impact would remain forever and that he had been irrevocably transformed. By the experience, she paused at the doorway, looked back once more, her eyes calm, unyielding, promising mastery and challenges beyond comprehension, and then disappeared into the shadows, leaving him to face the reality of his own awakening.